Hi everybody, Dan Illman, Matt Bernier. We're kicking off Breeders' Cup Future Star Friday with the $1 million Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint. We're going 5.5 furlongs on the turf at Churchill Downs. Let's take a look at this overflow field. Matt, the two morning line favorites are down towards the inside, and Strike Silver, the number one, ran a fairly remarkable race in his turf debut, the Indian Summer. I mean, he just walked out of the gate, got bounced around, and went last to first. You usually don't see that going 5.5 furlongs. He was aided by a very fast pace.
Yeah, that's kind of my only, I don't even really want to call it a knock, but I just look at that race and I say he had a lot of things go his way. I understand he didn't get out of the gate particularly well, but boy, they threw it down. And I know that turf course is officially listed as firm, but you want to talk about some give in it. So perhaps that works to Strike Silver's advantage, considering it sounds like we're going to have at the very least good, if not sort of worse conditions on the grass for Friday and Saturday. Look, he ran just fine. I just think down on the inside, 4-1, to me, that is no bargain. I'm going to be fading him.
I wouldn't be surprised if the number 2 Soldier's Call, coming in from Europe, ends up the favorite at post time. He is the second choice at 9-2. He's done some remarkable things overseas in Europe, never off the board from 7 lifetime starts. And just consider, he was the only 2-year-old in the field last time out in the Group 1 Prix de la Baie. You don't see 2-year-olds in up races in North America. And not only was he the only 2-year-old in that field, but he ran great, only beaten ahead. And the 5th place horse came back to run second in listed company. The 14th placed runner came back to win a Group 3 on the all-weather. And this isn't your typical European plotter. This guy's got some speed.
Yeah, I would expect him to be forwardly placed. And like you say, I think the most remarkable thing about him is the fact that he was beaten ahead by older horses. He's a 2-year-old going 5 furlongs. I don't think the additional ground is going to be a problem. I like the fact that he's run relatively well on ground with a little bit of give in it. Just go to that run 3 starts back in that group stakes at Chantilly. There was good soft going, so not too concerned about the overall conditions. I think you got to view him as a major player in a spot like this, even given the fact that there's probably going to be some other speed in here. He's going to be upwardly mobile. I think he's a major player.
Yeah, the concerns are he's going to have to run around the turn for the first time. He's going to have to deal with some American speed burners. And you have to wonder if that hard race against older horses less than a month ago, coupled with a long flight to North America, maybe took some of the starch out of him. But I think he's a major player in here at a must-use. The 3 is Well Done Fox, another horse coming in from Europe for Richard Hannon, who sent out Out of the Flames to finish 3rd in this race last year. And Out of the Flames had sort of a similar prep pattern. He ran 3rd in the Julia Graves Rose Stakes in his last prep. Well Done Fox won that race this year and then ran really well twice in group company. He seems like a solid runner.
Yeah, I think he's honest. I think he's going to show up and run. I don't know that he's one of the best horses in this spot, and I think you probably deserve every bit of that 12-1. He's going to be, I don't want to say the feel-good sort of horse, but considering the situation with the ownership, obviously he was the owner of Leicester City and tragically was killed last weekend. There's going to be some sort of, positive sort of public vibes behind this horse. At the end of the day, strictly from a horse race standpoint, I think he is a notch below. To me, I'd be using him underneath.
Let's talk about some of the Wesley Ward train runners in this field. The number 7, Shang, a perfect 2 for 2, won his career debut on dirt, as all Wesley Ward trained 2-year-olds seemed to do during their spring meeting. Then shipped to Royal Ascot, handled turf, handled some nice company in the Group 2 Norfolk Stakes. Just consider, the 4th place horse in that race came back to win a Group 3. The 3rd place horse came back to win a listed race. 2 other horses came back to place in group company, but this horse has been away since June.
Yeah, you got to wonder what are we going to get off such a long layoff. You know that there is speed here. There's no question about it, and that's kind of Wesley Ward's MO. I'd expect this one to show that big speed again, be forwardly placed. A couple things now. You got to go 5.5 furlongs. You got to deal with a long layoff. You got to deal with other speed that's going to be up there accompanying you on the front end, and you're going to deal with some testing ground. A lot going against this horse, but at the end of the day, she really hasn't done anything wrong.
Interesting long shot from the Ward barn, I think, is the number 4 Stillwater Cove. This horse, I think, is a sprinter, and she proved it last time out, 2 starts back, in the Bolton Landing at Saratoga when she beat Chelsea Cloisters. I thought that was an underrated race last time out. Stretching out to a mile in the Natalma might be a little far for her. That was a very fast pace that fell apart. She was really the only part of the pace hanging around at the end of that race. The 6th place horse in that race came back to be beaten just ahead in the Grade 3 Mazarine on Synth. 20-1 on the morning line. Maybe Stillwater Cove can sort of make your exotics.
I thought about picking her on top. I ultimately ended up using her underneath. I agree with you. The Natalma just felt like that distance was a little bit too far, and given where she was in relation to that hot pace, thought that was a very credible sort of effort from her. And then 2 starts back, you made mention that Bolton Landing. I thought she was much the best over Chelsea Cloisters, and if you think you're going to get something similar to that, she's very interesting at a big price.
The 6 Moonlight Romance, also trained by Ward, beat the boys last time out at Kentucky Downs. Now, that was a 6.5 furlong race, but she did beat 2 minor next out winners. Interesting to note, though, she has already been beaten by both Soldier's Call and Shang.
Yeah, you start to wonder a little bit through 4 lifetime starts. I don't necessarily see any sort of giant improvement, particularly from a figure standpoint, but at the same time, proven over 6.5 furlongs, this 5.5 isn't going to be any sort of an issue, especially considering you're going from Kentucky Downs. And I like the fact that she has run well over ground that is less than firm, which again is likely what they're going to catch on Friday.
Ward also has Chelsea Cloisters, and you mentioned you're thinking of fading the winner of the Indian Summer Strike Silver, and I kind of agree. If I was going to take a horse out of that race, it might be Chelsea Cloisters, who was up close to that pretty fast pace and was only beaten a neck, and she ran well in the Stillwater Cove 2 starts back. She's group placed already in France. She's got a little bit of a pedigree, a half to a stakes-winning dirt sprinter named Beggar Thy Neighbor. 8-1 on the morning line, though I would need more. I still think she needs to prove it against this international cast.
Yeah, I agree with that. Of the horses out of the Indian Summer, this is the one that I would prefer. She made the first run into that hot pace, but as you made mention, I kind of feel like she's just a slight notch below right now some of the better horses, and at 8-1 in a race that seems like it's a bit of a scramble, I'm not too interested in that.
We mentioned that the number 2, Soldier's Call, should show some speed. We figured Shang for Wesley Ward should show some speed. What about the 5 Bulletin? What a debut on turf, going 5 furlongs. When you look at this pedigree, you might not expect it. The Dam was a Grade 3 stakes winner going 9 on the dirt. Bulletin's a half to Tismiz Sue, who I think won the Ogden Phipps on the dirt. Bulletin just ran off and hid from those horses, but I think that was a pretty weak bunch.
It certainly was. I tend to agree with that. But boy, if you just look at this race from a speed figure standpoint, whether it's buyers, whether it's time form, this is the fastest horse in the race. And you've got high profile connections with Pletcher and Castellano. There's a part of me that looks at it and says you've got a lot to overcome, though. I know it was a stakes group that this one debuted against. You're facing much tougher horses. You're going an extra half furlong. There's going to be other pace up front, and you're going to be facing some ground that you've never encountered before. 10-1, I think that's a very square price on a horse that could arguably be one of the best ones, but I'm just not totally sold just yet.
Todd knows where to place these horses, however. Here's the formulator fact for Bullet. In the past 3 years, 2-year-old debut winners on the turf, coming back in the second start, 50% winners, 7 of 8 on the board, a $5.25 return on investment. We talked about some of the European, Soldier's Call, Well Done Fox. Let's move on to the 8, Sergei Prokofiev, going out for Aidan O'Brien. Now, this horse ran into some toughies in the Phoenix, in the Middle Park, and those were the races that O'Brien's horse that won this race last year, Declaration of Peace, sort of ran mediocre races in. Sergei Prokofiev ran mediocre races in those races, and then he came back with a pretty striking performance last time out in a Group 3. I mean, he was buried down on the rail with about 3 furlongs to go, but once he found a seam, he came flying late. I think the pace was fast for him in that race, but that was a very visually impressive performance.
Maybe I'm going a little bit overboard with it, but I have written in my little note that I made that I didn't think he had any business winning that race. And the fact that he got out and won the way that he did, he won by a length and a quarter. I would have been surprised if he had run third, given the way that he was bottled up down and behind horses on the rail. Once Donica got him out into the clear, he really fired home. I think you've got to look at him as a major threat in here, and clearly they've thought highly of him. Look at that price tag, $1.1 million back at Keeneland, September of 2017.
And the third place finisher of that race came back to run second in a listed stake, but boy, he can't afford another poor start or I think be too far back in a race like this. There's only a short amount of time in this 5.5 furlong sprint to get going. Queen of Bermuda's the number 11, second in a Group 2 last time out in France. This barn knows how to ship. They won the Belmont Gold Cup earlier this year.
Yeah, I guess the only problem for me when I look at her, I just overall think through 10 lifetime starts, sure, she's honest, she's hit the border, she's running the exact on 7 occasions. I just don't see any sort of real giant improvement. You look at those time form ratings that she's earned overseas, she's usually in that low 90 range. Unless she jumps up in a big way, I don't think that's fast enough.
O'Brien is Sergei Prokofiev, also the 10 So Perfect. This is a filly Coming out of the Cheveley Park Stakes, and I think that was a very strong race this year. The 4th horse came back to run 3rd in a Group 1. The 7th horse was Queen of Bermuda, who's in this race, came back to run 2nd in a Group 2. The 8th came back to run 2nd in a Group 3. And I think So Perfect in her first start off a little bit of a layoff was pretty close to a solid pace. I mean, they went 6 furlongs in 1:10 that day in Newmarket. She made the front. She kind of finished evenly after that. She ran well in the Phoenix to finish ahead of Sergei Prokofiev 2 starts back. I think this filly has a little bit of an outside chance.
Yeah, and you get Lasix on for the first time. I think it is interesting to see Wayne Lorden has the mount as opposed to someone like Ryan Moore or one of the other riders that O'Brien usually employs. But at the end of the day, Lorden's come over here and had some success in the past as well. You make all good points about this filly, second off the bench. Maybe get a forward move.
And a formulator fact for the 10, So Perfect for Aidan O'Brien. Past 3 years, 2-year-olds, Lasix on, foreign chippers. We saw that last year in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint. 27% winners, over a $5 return on investment. Let's take a look at our top selections for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint. Tell us about the 12 Pocket Dynamo. Everyone was raving about Sergei Prokofiev's trouble last time out in the Cornwallis. This horse had a lot of trouble, too.
Well, and that's kind of the way that I'm looking at this, saying, Sergei Prokofiev, obviously, he was the one that was able to extricate himself and get clear and go on and win the race. Pocket Dynamo never had the opportunity to get clear and do any sort of running. He was in and amongst horses and very, very tight throughout. And he kind of bowled his way through and finished with a little bit of interest, but at that point, there was no chance he was going to do any real running. The fact that he finished 5th in that race, to me, that actually showed that there's something a little bit in this spot. And also, go back to those runs 2 and 3 starts back. That was over the summer as a 2-year-old. Those time form ratings that he earned, those are competitive with some of these other horses in here. That most recent run, I'm just basically drawing a line through it saying it's not nearly as bad as it looks on paper. It actually might be better. And if he takes a little bit of a step forward here, I think he's certainly interesting. 20-1 on the morning line. The concern I have is that outside post. That's no bargain, and you'll note that in the past he's had a little bit more of a forward running style than that day most recently in that Cornwallis Stakes where he was more toward the rear and he was shuffled amongst horses. I think he's going to be a little bit more forward. It's up to Rosario to try to save some ground at some point, but 20-1, I'll take a chance.
Only beaten a nose by Shang during the Royal Ascot meeting. Shang 5-1 on the morning line in this race. Pocket Dynamo 20-1 in this race. That's where you're going. Give me numbers.
12, 8, 2, 4.
I want to take a shot with So Perfect. I think the price is going to be right as sort of the other O'Brien. I like that Cheveley Park Stakes. I like that she finished ahead of Sergei Prokofiev. She's got a little bit of a pedigree being by Scat Daddy and sold for $400,000. But this is a race I want to use 3 horses in multis. I want to use my top pick, the 10 So Perfect. I want to use Soldier's Call off that remarkable effort in the Prix de la Baie. And I also want to use Sergei Prokofiev off that striking stretch kick last time out in a Group 3. 10-2-8-7 for me in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint. We're just getting started on Future Stars Friday. Approximate post time is 3:21 Eastern. Good luck.